You all hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah.
So, thanks, obviously, for having me here. This is my first time really for Crainn doing a debate. So just thanks for having me here. So, we're here debating about the legalisation of drugs, obviously, and on all sides we want to reduce harms. So, on the opposition side to legalisation, they believe that reducing the harms of drugs will come about by prohibition. So by making drugs illegal, creating a black market and criminalising users. But unfortunately, that's not the case. This isn't just my opinion. The statistics and the data show that prohibition has had such an awful impact on the lives of so many people around Ireland and around the globe. And prohibition has been built upon myths. Prohibition in Ireland the debate began in 1975, and it was built on a number of myths which have since been disproven. So I'm here tonight to disprove some of those myths on why prohibition has come about, and the reasons why prohibition is harmful in general. So I'm going to start off with one that you might be familiar with. So cannabis is the most popular drug in Ireland, as many of you might know, just from personal experience or from looking at the data. And one of the most frequent risks of cannabis that is brought around is the link between cannabis and psychosis. So people who advocate for the prohibition of cannabis will often cite that psychosis and cannabis are deeply, deeply linked, and by legalising cannabis, psychosis rates will skyrocket. But unfortunately for those on that side, it's not the case. I have a report from Public Health England here, who've done a really, really good study on psychosis in the UK, how many people have psychosis, how it's risen over time, and where psychosis actually comes from. But before I get to that, let's look at cannabis use in the UK over the past 20 years. So, in 2000, 23.6% of people in the United Kingdom used cannabis. And in 10 years, that rose by nearly 10% up to 31%. So that's a major increase in the amount of people who have used cannabis. So let's have a look. Is there a link? If the use of cannabis went up by 10%, psychosis should have went up as well. But Public Health England reports from their findings that they are consistent with a continued trend of broad stability in the rates of psychosis over the past 20 years. The link is not as tight as it's made out to be. Again, let's look at schizophrenia and cannabis, which is another link. Global cannabis use, this is a study from the United Kingdom again. They do a lot of studies on here, unlike Ireland. Cannabis use has increased by 20 times over the past 40 years. I don't know if you can see this, but this is the graph here. You can see it goes up exponentially. And schizophrenia rates over the past 20 years stayed completely stable and actually decreased. So this is one of the myths that cannabis prohibition was built upon, that the link between cannabis and psychosis is deeply, deeply connected, but in reality, it isn't. Let's talk about the harms of prohibition. So because cannabis in Ireland is illegal, it means people who are consuming cannabis are relying on a black market, which is very unfortunate and very dangerous. So in May 2021, the HSE published a study on synthetic cannabinoids, which is fake cannabis. It's a different drug than cannabis. So a product you may be familiar with, you've heard about, it's been in the news, it's THC e-juice, which is a black market product that circulates. It's very, very, very popular at the moment as a way to consume cannabis. So the HSE published a study looking at THC e-liquid and the content within it. And how much of that do you think is actually THC? I just want you to think about that for a second in terms of percentage. How much of the THC e-liquid that is going around at the moment is THC? How much? You're probably thinking 20%. I talked to a few people about this. 20%, 25%, 50%, 3% THC. And this is one of the most popular products that I'm sure people in this university have consumed, THC e-juice. 3% is THC. This is from the HSE. The majority of it is a research chemical from China named AB-pinacate, which is linked with psychosis. So the people who are concerned about cannabis use and psychosis, what are they concerned about here? Are they concerned about cannabis itself, or are they concerned about synthetic products? And in terms of decriminalisation, I've heard in the opening statement that decriminalisation is the right solution. Unfortunately, it's not the solution, because decriminalisation just means personal users are going to be free from criminal charges, but it continues the black market. And this black market is complicit in ruining the lives of so many people. 3% THC, are we really happy with that circulating around our universities? I've seen it around my university in DCU, I've seen it around my community, and I've seen how it actually destroys people. And when they go to a doctor, they still think it's THC. The doctor will believe, because there's no proper detection for synthetics, that it is THC, and this is where some of these myths come from, unfortunately. Another concern that I've seen raised by people who are against the legalisation of drugs and cannabis specifically is that underage use of cannabis can be quite harmful, which is indeed true, of course, and I think teenage use of cannabis is a big issue in Ireland at the moment, and it needs to be addressed. But the only way we can address that is not through prohibition or increase in policing in working class areas where unfortunately it actually it happens the most. Most drug arrests happen in working class areas. This is not how we fix underage use of cannabis. And the only way we can fix underage use of cannabis and stop it from happening is by legalising. And you don't need to take my word for it. You can listen to the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which is a very, very, very reputable source on child psychiatry, who found that past year prevalence of marijuana use in states that have seen cannabis reform has dropped by an estimated 24%. So listen, if we all agree here that we want to stop underage people from using cannabis, I think we can all agree with that. Unfortunately, prohibition and criminalising users isn't the way about it. We need to see law reform, we need to see prohibition if we want to see these great declines we're seeing in the States. Okay, so how many people in Ireland use cannabis? This is something that's up for debate because there are different studies that show different things. The HSE estimate between 6.5% and 7%. This was a study done in 2015. The EU done a study in 2021 that estimates upwards of 17%. So, the Minister for Drugs, Frank Fagan, I emailed him, he's in charge of drugs policy and he is a prohibitionist. He discusses the harms of cannabis in an email to me, and he talks about a... Is this time for me to finish?
That is your time.
Thank you.
You can finish your current sentence or paragraph.
Okay, I'll finish very, very quickly. So, he discusses the cannabis-related harms, and he talks about 2,000 treatment episodes relating to cannabis a year. First of all, we go back to the synthetics point. We don't know how many of these people were consuming synthetics, but we can compare this to a legal substance like alcohol, for example, which results in 18,000 hospitalizations, not just treatment episodes, but hospitalizations a year. So why do we see alcohol as okay, but cannabis is not? I'm going to finish there. So thank you for listening.
We thank Ryan for that fantastic speech, and